The dynamic duo known as the Holy Brothers, Marvin Etzioni and OG Discograffiti Soldier of Sound Willie Aaron, have a new album out called High in My Balloon. This remarkable album is the triumphant result of the two friends turning to music for comfort and strength after Marvin's bout with leukemia and Willie was forced to deal with the loss of his wife of 25 years to cancer. Americana Highways described it as like Brian Wilson snuck into the studio, fired up the machines, and did some work on some of the tracks not locked up. Really, the harmonies, basic tracks, songwriting, and lots of other odds and ends are that momentous. If you love the harmonies and sonic experimentation of Bookends era Simon & Garfunkel, the Beach Boys, and Beck's Circus Sea Change, you owe it to yourself to dig into the musical wonders of High in My Balloon by the Holy Brothers, available right now on Regional Records. Future Prophet Records is at it again, filling the charts with all the greatest hits from another dimension, a dimension where great music rules the airwaves like it used to in this one. Swear Tapes presents Crooked Teeth, available right now on Future Prophet Records. That's Future, Prophet Records.com. Order now. Jefferson Airplane takes off as a milestone of popular music culture, and every so often, as on the first and last tracks, it really does live up to that promise of changing the world and making it a better place. Welcome to Discograffiti, the deep dive podcast for music obsessives that gives maniacs like you and me the chance to connect with a brotherhood obsessed with rating the entire discography of every single artist and band that ever mattered. I'm your host, Dave Gebrow, and when I was a kid, I thought I loved music. But no, that was only the beginning. I almost lost my life, and in the process, it made music a top priority in a way I'd thought was completely unimaginable. I quit my job, went all in on Discograffiti, and never looked back. And so, with 3 new episodes each week, you're going to gain a comprehensive knowledge of an act's history and output in the time it takes to listen to one album. Each new guest swings a hard left into an area you either had no idea you needed to know about, or know all about and can't believe you're not alone out there. And in this episode, we'll be turning our spray cans on Jefferson Airplane! This episode is part of a series called Feed Your Head, The Great Jefferson Airplane Deep Dive, which I've consciously crafted to act as the ultimate repository of fact and opinion on one of the greatest bands ever to walk the face of the earth, the almighty Jefferson Airplane. This is part 4 of the series, covering the period from August 1965 to August 1966. That is, from their very first gig to the release of their debut album in the style of an audiobook documentary. Here are just a few of the many things discussed in this episode of Discograffiti. Grace Slick, Skip Spence, and Spencer Dryden enter the picture. Members begin to play musical chairs as they edge closer and closer to the classic lineup, their early audition for Phil Spector, all the record labels the Airplane turned down, and the one they didn't. Jack Cassidy flies out to San Francisco to audition for the band. The stylistic affectation that initially did not endear Jack to Paul Kantner. The wheeling and dealing of their first manager, notorious shyster Matthew Cates, and the trials and tribulations behind the making of their debut album, Jefferson Airplane Takes Off. And away we go then! Phase 1, the 60s. 1966 to 1970. Yorma says, success did come quickly, and I think we had a real sense of entitlement. We were big stars all of a sudden. Bill Thompson was there that first night. As Jefferson Airplane's newly appointed press agent, it was his responsibility to get the word out about the group and the club. Thompson was friendly with the San Francisco Chronicle's music writers, the highly influential jazz critic Ralph J. Gleason, who had alienated some of his loyal readers recently by championing the new rock, and the younger but also well-respected John L. Wasserman. Thompson called the writers and convinced both of them to come to the Matrix to check out the airplane. On August 29, 1965, in the widely circulated datebook section of the Sunday Chronicle, Wasserman devoted the better part of a page to the Matrix and the airplane, accompanied by a large photo of Marty Balin strumming an acoustic guitar. The article was titled, "The Matrix, Social Blues via the Jefferson Airplane." He wrote that the group did not play, quote, folk music, nor blues, nor rock and roll, yet there's something of all of these forms in the airplane sound. Wasserman noted with foresight, quote, "It is entirely possible that this will be the new direction of contemporary pop music," end quote. On that boiling hot afternoon elsewhere in the city, Grace Slick leafed through her Sunday newspaper half-heartedly until chancing upon that article. Grace's gaze lingered on Marty's photo. He looked interesting, Grace thought. Dark and brooding, unsmiling, turning away from the camera. Grace convinced her husband, Jerry Slick, that it might be fun to check out this group with the bizarre name. If nothing else, it would be a night out. Grace says, "I went to see Jefferson Airplane at the Matrix, and they were making more money in a day than I made in a week. They only worked for 2 or 3 hours a night, and they got to hang out. I thought, this looks better than what I'm doing. I knew I could more or less carry a tune, and I figured if they could do it, I could." 2 weeks later, on September 13th, Ralph J. Gleason headlined his On the Town column, Jefferson Airplane, Sound and Style. Predicted Gleason, quote, "I don't know who they will record for, but they will obviously record for someone." That was the cue. In the following weeks, virtually every record label of significance, not to mention many of none whatsoever, sent scouts to the Matrix. Cates arranged it so at least 2 of them would be in the club simultaneously on any given night, each thinking he'd better make a move before the other. Gleason had given the band a legitimacy it couldn't have bought with 1,000,000 buttons and bumper stickers. It had been exactly 1 month since their first public performance. A few weeks after the group started performing, Peliquin was out. Although a bunch of reasons have been suggested for his exit, one being that Yorma refused to play in a band with somebody who'd been a cop, what's probably closest to the truth was that Jerry had complained once too often about the band's pot smoking. Being a military-trained drummer who also had some jazz background, Peliquin became frustrated with the band's meandering rhythm. According to Jerry, the situation came to a head one day when Paul's eyeglasses broke. Jerry went to the optical shop where he was employed and made Paul a new pair. When he returned to give Paul the glasses, he found out that Paul had been interviewing drummers. Jerry says, "I beat the shit out of him. And Marty essentially said to me, 'Paul is more important to me than you are.' It fell to Marty to find a new drummer. There were plenty of them around, but Marty needed magic to work for him again. Talent was only part of the requirement." Balin cast his eyes around the Matrix one day, and they froze on Alexander Spence, who everyone called Skip. Skip Spence had gone to the Matrix with several local musicians he'd befriended just earlier that day. David Freiberg, John Cipollina, and Jim Murray, soon to comprise 3/5 of Quicksilver Messenger Service, another of the original San Francisco Giants. The 3 of them were planning to rehearse at the club that afternoon on equipment borrowed from the airplane. They invited Skip, with whom they had jammed that day in a Sausalito park, to come along for the ride. What attracted Balin to Spence wasn't solely his rock star looks, but a boundless energy that Marty wanted to see behind the drum kit. Marty says, "Skippy was this beautiful kid, all gold and shining like a little Buddha. I always go by people's vibrations, my first intuition. I just saw him and said, 'Hey man, you're my drummer.' And he said, 'No, I'm a guitar player.' And I said, 'No, you're my drummer.' I gave him some sticks and said, 'Go home and practice and I'll call you in a week.' He said, 'Well, I'll give it a try.' And he was great. His hands would bleed, he would give so much. The girls would hang around the back of the stage just to get a look at him." Spence quickly adapted and made his debut at the Matrix in September. Just days after Skip joined the airplane, he was a guest at Signy's wedding to the Matrix's lighting man, Jerry Anderson. Not surprisingly, LSD was present at the affair, and Signy's wedding was the occasion of one of Skip Spence's first acid trips, although not his very first. To hear more about his very first acid trip, check out Discograffiti's Moby Grape series, especially the interview with Cam Cobb about Skip Spence in particular. Decades later, Signe still vividly recalled Skip spending most of the night in a corner, babbling incoherently, off in his own world. 2 days after her wedding, when most newlyweds would be on their honeymoon, Signe Anderson was in Los Angeles auditioning for Phil Spector, whose sister had heard the commotion about the group and called them. Yorma says, "I remember he had bodyguards and a pellet pistol, which he was shooting. He made me uncomfortable." Bob Harvey says, "I've never seen a more paranoid bastard in my life than Spector. He didn't want us in the room where he was, so he had us play out in the hall." With the addition of Skip Spence to the band, the drummer problem had been solved. But now, it was Bob Harvey's turn to get the pink slip. Yorma in particular felt Harvey was dragging the band down. They were an electric band now, getting louder and more complex in their arrangements. Harvey played an acoustic bass and thought like a bluegrass musician. Even after Harvey made the switch to an electric bass, the band agreed that he wasn't cutting it. Yorma wanted a bassist who could give the band some solid backbone, a player with whom he could really trade off. The first person that Yorma called as a possible replacement was his brother Peter, who was attending Stanford University. Peter was interested, but Mom and Dad Kaukinen put a quick kibosh on that idea. One musician in the family was enough, they said. Yorma had someone else in mind for the job and recalled that his DC buddy Jack Cassidy had fooled around with the bass a bit. Yorma explained to the others in the band that he had never actually heard Jack play the bass, only the guitar, so inviting him in might be risky. But Yorma felt that Jack was a good enough musician that he could pick it up. When Yorma first informed Jack that he was playing in a rock and roll band, Cassidy's initial reaction was to laugh. He thought Yorma, who he knew as a die-hard folk blues traditionalist, was joking. Once Jack was convinced that Yorma really was in a rock band, Yorma spelled out the situation. Cassidy said he'd have to think it over. He was going to college and had steady work, but he'd give it serious thought. A few days later, Yorma told Jack to come to San Francisco and try out for the band, and that if he was accepted, he'd get paid whether the band worked or not. This time, there was no hesitation. Send him a plane ticket, Jack said, and he'd be there as soon as he could. As Jack disembarked at San Francisco International, Yorma told him, "I sure hope you can play." All right, that about does it. For over 4 years now, Discograffiti's Friday episodes have been completely free, and it's been my pleasure. But for a variety of reasons, Discograffiti's now moved to the subscription-based Patreon as our primary platform. Moving forward, our public stream will feature a teaser of the Friday episode and a Tuesday teaser of the bonus episode, and that's all. But here's the good news. Only $5 a month will get you the weekly Friday podcast to which you become accustomed. That's it. It's a no-brainer at just $1 an episode. And just that little bit will be what's required to help the show survive. To sweeten the pot, you'll also get regular installments of the Discograffiti Soldiers of Sound podcast. That's Rudy Fishman's podcast within a podcast featuring our Patreon members as guests. You'll also get access to over 100 back episodes of that show. The $10 Lieutenant tier gets you all that, plus access to half of the Patreon archive. That's hundreds of additional episodes, plus copies of my personal show notes, which include invaluable research, star ratings, and reviews. But the $20 major tier is the place to be, unless you can support the show on even higher tiers, which, if you can afford it, offers substantial perks, including advertising on the show and selecting the guests and artists I cover. With the major tier and above, you get it all. The Monday bonus episodes, aka the best stuff, the Friday show, the Soldiers of Sound podcast, plus access to the entire archive. That's many hundreds of Patreon episodes, an absolutely endless barrage of music entertainment, including 50 episodes of The Private Press with Paul Major, Rock Cousteau, Queasy Listening, and so much more. So support the podcast that's been supporting you for years. Discograffiti's calling, and it needs you, so don't risk feeling guilty by not giving. But enough of me yapping. Go on, subscribe now. Visit patreon.com/discograffiti and find the tier that's right for you. Stay tuned, because next week brings upon us the 5th installment of Feed Your Head, the Great Jefferson Airplane Deep Dive, in which Jack Cassidy and I perform the first of 8 two-parter deep divectomies, a series of cold water plunges so dangerously submersive that we both very nearly succumbed to 8 successive fatal cases of the bends. It's Jack Cassidy on Jefferson Airplane Takes Off. Okay, here's the week up ahead. This Sunday, our weekly show within a show, the Discograffiti Soldiers of Sound podcast, drops for our Patreon's private tier. These are real people with talent and a burning fire deep inside, just like you and I. Then, come Monday, the major tier gets a very special treat. Monday's bonus episode is part 16 of our love series, which covers the Black Beauty and reel-to-reel era, a little-known but unbelievably fascinating era during which Arthur was afforded his final substantial opportunity, and what happened with that opportunity in Arthur's dubiously capable hands. There will be a very short sneak peek running publicly for free on Tuesday morning, but the entirety of the show will only be accessible on the major tier of our Patreon. A heartfelt Discograffiti thanks goes out to my beautiful wife and son, Jen and Mason, Jack Cassidy, Jam Pole Artist Management, Max Michaels, Rudy Fishman, Becky Boyd, my mom, my dad, my incredibly loyal fans, and especially the entire Patreon community, the Soldiers of Sound. I love every last one of you, and this show would not exist without you, my friends. Speaking of friends, it's high time for some new ones. They're in our Facebook group, Discograffiti Soldiers of Sound. That's the best way to find out what's coming up on the show, but there's a hell of a lot more. You get recaps of the day in music history, the ability to pitch questions to guests, polls that put you in the driver's seat on guest and band decisions, and access to a thriving creative hub if you're looking for a collaborator. So make sure you don't miss out. You can find the link to the Discograffiti Soldiers of Sound Facebook page right there in the show notes. And if you don't mess with the Zuck, no sweat. Just email me at info@discograffiti.com and I'll keep you in the loop. So now that it's done and you want more, another way to dive even deeper into the amniotically dark and cozy psychedelic underworld of the 60s and 70s is to leap headfirst into our Spirit series. That's episodes 241 to 249. The Lenny Waronker interview, that's 244 and 245. Our ongoing Graham Nash interview, in which he talks about everything he's ever done. Our 13-episode Moby Grape series featuring interviews with Peter Lewis, Don Stevenson, and Bob Mosley. That's episodes 208 to 214. The Beatles' Pete Best. That's episode 188. Our free design interview with all the Dedrick siblings. That's 160 to 162. Our Mamas and Papas series featuring my 16-hour Michelle Phillips interview, which she says is the best interview she's ever done. That's episodes 141 to 159. My 13-hour interview with Terry Kirkman and Jules Alexander about everything the association ever did. That's 109 to 113. My interview with Vashti Bunyan about her life and everything she's ever recorded, that's 103 to 104. My interview with Os Mutants Sergio Diaz, that's 86 and 87. Lou Barlow on the Zombies, that's 59 and 60. Foxygen's Jonathan Rado on Todd Rundgren, that's 37 and 40. Anthony Fantano on the Velvet Underground, that's 32 and 33. Bob Forrest on the band, that's 25 and 27. Andrew Sandoval on the Monkees, that's 22 and 23. Don Randy on David Axelrod, that's episode 17. And Pink Floyd is 1 and 2. And of course, be sure to mark your calendars, because next Friday, May 29th, we're coming at you with Feed Your Head Part 5. It's Part 1 of the Jack Cassidy Jefferson Airplane Takes Off Deep Dive. Trust me, you're not going to want to miss it. And so, from now till then, don't let our youth go to waste, lads and ladies. It's Discograffiti!